So why think Atlantic? Atlantic is not one of the big geopolitical ensembles that we tend to think about. We think Pacific, that's kind of the area of big growth. And the reason to think Atlantic is precisely because very few do. And because very few do, there's opportunities, there's unusual thinking to be done that others may be overlooking. A second reason is to get away from a general sense that we're heading towards big power confrontation, north-south confrontation, east-west confrontation. In many ways, the Atlantic space is not plagued by this kind of rivalries, and therefore may be a good laboratory for global cooperation and the governance of global issues. Well, the main driver is, of course, the need to grow. Latin America is not in a good moment. Europe has been suffering from slow growth. Africa is doing a bit better, but still there's a massive need to grow there. I think there's all reasons to think where there's more opportunities. There's also some challenges which are not specific to the Atlantic region, but where the Atlantic region has a big role to play. For example, the connection between climate change and food security, right? We know agriculture is one of the big drivers of climate change. Atlantic region has a lot of very intensive agriculture, which is very problematic from the climate change point of view, but it's also where some of the worst problems of food security happen, in Africa in particular. So how to balance off these things may be one of the things that the Atlantic region could do. Well, I think there's two big sets of obstacles. One has to do with the traditional north-south rivalry and the inequality between the regions of the global north and those of the global south, and all the grievances that come with it, and unfair in global governance. And that makes it very difficult for the space to come together. I think for very good reasons, players of the south, after the colonial and post-colonial experience, the Washington Consensus and many other issues, are suspicious of the intentions of the northern players. The other set of issues has to do with this trend which we see across the world and also across the region of sovereignty and nationalism growing very quickly. And in particular, we see the new Brazilian government is more nationalist than we've seen for a long time in Brasilia. The South African government, more and more the European countries have these populist sovereignist tendencies growing. And the Republican Party in the United States has a candidate that is more nationalist than we have seen for a long, long time. So we are in a moment where cooperation and pooling resources and doing things together are in decline in some ways, right? Brexit, for example, is a clear sign of not wanting to do things together. And in this climate, of course, to think of an even more complex, even bigger cooperation in the Atlantic seems more difficult. Paradoxically, though, it may also be the time to look at uncommon links, since we're thinking less of the regional approaches, and that's where perhaps there may be some opportunities for innovation in the Atlantic space.